Dear colleague, I would like to inform you that I requested consultation to be held regarding the nomination of Bulgaria historical and archaeological complex proposed by the Russian Federation. Draft Decision 37.8b.43. This process is currently ongoing, involving all the parties concerned. Please note that today we need to close the item 7A regarding state of conservation and item 8B regarding nomination. And I would like to give the floor to Excellency the Ambassador of Qatar, because yesterday we have, I think, the translation was not clear when Sheikha from Qatar took the floor. So now Excellency the Ambassador of Qatar would like to do some clarification. Please, Excellency Ambassador of Qatar, you have the floor, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. يسرني ويسعدني أن أؤكد اليوم على ما جاء في الأمس في حديث سعادة الشيخ المياس الثاني من أن دولة قطر قررت استضافة الدورة 38 للجنة التراث العالمي لعام 2014. فأهلا وسهلا بكم جميعا في قطر في العام القادم إذا وافقت اللجنة المكرمة على هذه الدعوة، وشكرا.
So we welcome, the decision of Qatar to host the 38th session of the World Heritage Committee, and we fully support, Qatar to be host next year. I would like also to inform the committee that we have to nominate by name the chairman of the committee, the chairman of the 38th session, and we have also nominated by name the next rapporteur, that means the rapporteur of the 38th session. And in Cambodia this year, we have to nominate by the name of the country 5 vice chairmen. You see, so by name of the person, the chairman and the rapporteur, and by name of the country, you see, the 5 vice chairmen. So I think this is the task that we have to do from now to the end of the session. Please note that today we need to close the item 7A regarding state of conservation and item 8B regarding nomination. So I think we still have consultation going on certain issue. I guess that you understand this. So we are trying our best how to go smoothly. But we don't know if we succeed to go smoothly or not. Yes. I come to the item 37.8b.40, ancient city of Torik, Czechoslovakia, and its Kora, Ukraine. So draft decision and 37,8b.40. I now invite ECOMOS to present the nomination of the ancient city of Toric, Chersonesy, and its Kora, Ukraine. ECOMOS, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. This is a serial nomination of 7 components of the ancient city of Toric, Chersones, and its Kora. These sites are the remains of an ancient city founded in the 5th century BCE as a colonial settlement of the Dorian Greeks. The city is surrounded by a Kora landscape demarcated in several hundred rectangular allotments of equal size. Toric, Chersones is located on the Heraklion Peninsula in southwest Crimea. Originally, Chersones city and its Kora occupied an area of more than 10,000 hectares, of which now 267 hectares of the remaining best preserved structures were selected for this nomination. The first component is the ancient city of Chersones, while the other components represent the surrounding agricultural hinterland. The city was inhabited continuously between the 5th century BCE and the 15th century, when it suddenly declined and became abandoned for centuries. Only the Orthodox monastery now built in its center has left an irreversible mark of some more recent usage on site. The city is surrounded by fortification walls in 2 lines, as you see here. Chersones' street network is laid out according to the orthogonal grid model, with the main street functioning as its linear center. The second component is the Kora plot of Eucharina Gully, which illustrates land division features of the second half of the 4th century BCE. The third component in Berman's Gully, which is shown here on the map, contains remains of Stone Age and Bronze Age settlements, as well as fragments of 2 Kora plots. In the component site 4, at Bezimyanaya height, located at one of the highest points and providing views over Balaklava Valley, one finds the remains of one of the outer boundary segments of the Kora demarcations. The 5th component site, in Streletskaya Gully, contains well-preserved examples of vineyard planting and division walls. The Kora plot on the isthmus of Mayadni Peninsula forms the 6th component and contains a fortified Hellenistic settlement identified as the so-called Old Chersones. The 7th and final component is the Cape Vinogradny, a scenic rock cliff setting with stunning views. Archaeological excavations undertaken here have revealed remains of a cave church, a crypt with tombs, and traces of a monastery which functioned from the 6th up to the 15th century. ICOMOS considers, however, that it has not been illustrated how this component, which exclusively relates to later monastic remains, can be exceptional for the wider Kora landscape, and ICOMOS therefore considers that the inclusion of this component is not justified. ICOMOS considers that with the exception of this component just introduced, the serial approach and the criteria 2 and 5 are justified, and that the conditions of integrity and authenticity have been met. ICOMOS considers that while the boundaries are adequate in providing a minimum basis for outstanding universal value, the property should ideally be extended in the future to encompass wider segments of the remaining Kora landscape. Legal protection for the property is sufficient, but the buffer zone needs to be strengthened through formal adoption of the well-developed boundaries and land use regimes for the protected areas project into the master development plan. The need for conservation is essential in this property, as the archaeological structures are very fragile, and ICOMOS requested to focus financial resources on conservation measures. ICOMOS further requests that the submitted draft management plan be finalized and adopted, and ICOMOS in fact received the finalized version of the management plan here in Phnom Penh. However, this has not yet been evaluated. ICOMOS recommends to inscribe this property on the World Heritage List on the basis of criterion 2 and 5, with the exception of the serial component 7, Cape Vinogradny. Nevertheless, ICOMOS recommends to the state party to continue processes towards the future extension of this property, strengthening the buffer zone protection, and to focus the majority of financial resources available on conservation measures urgently needed. ICOMOS further recommends to commence surveys both on land and underwater to know the full potential for possible future extensions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Before I open the floor for comment, I would like to repeat my announcement before that. You see, today we have to close at item 7A and item 8B. So still a lot of things to do. If can be, you see, I like the comment. I think on the proposal or nomination for the congratulation comment. Maybe we can reduce a little bit, otherwise we cannot go quick. So please, I open the floor. Russia. Yes, I give the floor to Russia, please.
Спасибо большое. Доброе утро всем. Уважаемые господа, сегодня, мне кажется, вписанием Херсонеса мы включили в список всемирного наследия еще одну жемчужину, поскольку мы очень хорошо знаем этот город, и мы от всей души поздравляем Украину с этим замечательным событием.
You have the floor. Estonia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Estonia welcomes this nomination, although we regret that the Orthodox Church was unable to refrain from building its monastery in the middle of archaeological site. And please excuse me for repeating, but we consider all the evaluations by ICOM very professional and comprehensive, but they still differ of each other, and this particular one is the most generous. Thank you.
I give the floor to Germany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Germany congratulates the state party for this nomination and intends to support it. Thank you.
Mali, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, la délégation malienne félicite l'État parti d'Ukraine pour la qualité du dossier et soutient son inscription, notamment pour les critères 2 et 5. Nous sommes d'avis avec l'ICOMOS que des informations complémentaires doivent être fournies.
The floor to Qatar.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. نحن بدورنا نهنئ أوكرانيا على هذا الملف المتكامل، كما نحيي أيكوموس على عملها الجيد ونؤيد تسجيل الموقع. شكرا.
Call on Serbia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Serbian delegations wishes also to thank the state party of Ukraine for bringing such an important archaeological site to our attention and through a very well elaborated dossier. We also congratulate ICOMOS on approving the outstanding universal value for this site and creating a comprehensive and well-evaluated dossier. Last but not least, we wish to thank Secretariat also on putting those things together and bringing them to us. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
La France, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La France félicite l'organe consultatif pour cet excellent travail et se réjouit de cette proposition d'inscription pour l'Ukraine qu'elle félicite à cette occasion. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Délégation du Cambodge.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci à l'ECOMOS pour cette excellente présentation. Et le Cambodge se joint à la plupart des délégués pour appuyer, soutenir l'inscription de cette cité antique de Chernouzès. Je vous remercie.
I call on United Arab Emirates, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. الإمارات بدورها تهني الدولة طرف أوكرانيا على هذا الملف القيم وعلى هذه الإضافة المميزة لمواقع التراث العالمي. نحن ندعم هذا الترشيح ونشكر الإيكومس على الجهد الواضح في إبراز ما يتميز به هذا الموقع يعني، ونثق بأن الدولة الطرف ستوفي بالمشاغل التي أشاروا إليها. نهني أوكرانيا مكررا. شكرا.
No more comment, no objection. I now declare the decision 37, Com 8B.40 adopted. Let me congratulate Ukraine on behalf of the entire committee for the inscription of this property. Ukraine, you have the floor for 2 minutes, please.
Уважаемый господин председатель, уважаемые члены комитета, дамы и господа, Украина искренне благодарит всех за принятие такого решения. Хочу сказать, что 37-я сессия очень примечательная и знаковая для нас, потому что на этой сессии рассмотрены были 5 вопросов, касающихся Украины, и принято 5 положительных решений, за что мы очень благодарны. Вместе с тем мы понимаем ту степень ответственности, которая лежит на нас, потому что решения непростые, а ко многому обязывают. Спасибо большое за высокое доверие. Мы учтем все рекомендации и будем дальше сотрудничать. Также благодарим ЕКОМОС за профессиональную и объективную оценку всех вопросов. Очень благодарны. И позвольте 2 слова скажет генеральный директор заповедника Херсонес-Таврический Леонид Жунько.
Уважаемый господин президент, уважаемые дамы и господа, мы очень благодарны комитету и Центру за поддержку Херсонеса в номинации в список культурного наследия. Мы также хотим поблагодарить ИКОМОС за поддержку и подготовку наших номинационных документов. В списке всемирного наследия находится много выдающихся памятников античной культуры. Однако наш памятник представляет собой уникальное сочетание целостного, сохранившегося города и его обширные сельскохозяйственные округи Коры. На протяжении 20 столетий Херсонес является центром торговых, культурных контактов греческой, римской, а затем и византийской цивилизации с населением Северного Причерноморья. Херсонес, первый памятник юга Украины, внесен в список всемирного культурного наследия. Мы уверены, что это событие позитивно повлияет на состояние охраны памятников в регионе и послужит примером для других объектов культурного наследия Крыма, которые сейчас находятся в состоянии подготовки к номинации. Еще раз огромное спасибо комитету за высокое доверие. Хочется также благодарить организаторов сессии Королевства Камбоджи за теплое гостеприимство. Всем огромное спасибо.
I thank this distinguished representative from Ukraine. Yes. Now we come to the new item, Goldstan Palace, Iran, Islamic Republic of Iran, draft decision 37.8b.26. I now invite ECOMOS to present the nomination of Goldstan Palace. But before I give the floor to the Secretariat, Mr. Balsamo, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind that we received a factual error letter on this nomination, which is to be found on page 27 on the English version of INF 8b4 document, and on page 25 of the French version. I'd like to also say that this factual errors letter imply one little changement also in the draft decision that will be highlighted later on by the rapporteur when looking at the decision. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I would like to now present the Golestan Palace in Iran. And as Mr. Balsamo has just said, we would like to acknowledge that a factual error has been identified in this evaluation in relation to a 6-story structure in the buffer zone, which has been built earlier than stated in the ECOMOS report. And as was also mentioned, ECOMOS requested that the draft decision be revised accordingly to take note of this factual error. However, the revision does not affect the general recommendation of ECOMOS on this case. Golestan Palace is one of the oldest complexes in Tehran, originally built during the Safavid dynasty in the historic walled city. Following extensions in the 19th century, the palace complex was selected as the royal residence and seat of power of the Qajar ruling family. Golestan Palace is located in Tehran, the capital of Iran, and the proposed site covers 5.3 hectares and is surrounded by a buffer zone of 26 hectares. Golestan Palace consists of 8 key palace structures, mostly used as museums today, which surround the Golestan Gardens, forming a green oasis in the busy city center. The complex exemplifies architectural and artistic achievements of the Qajar era, including the introduction of European motifs and styles into Persian arts. Ayvan-i-Takht Mana is the oldest remaining structure in the palace, which hosts many coronation ceremonies of rulers. Shams-ul-Imara was based on Nasr ad-Din Shah's inspirations following a journey to Central Europe, and integrates outwardly oriented European architecture with Persian architectural language and layout. Its interior decorations equally illustrate the synthesis of European and Persian art. Imarat-e-Badgir illustrates high wind towers adorned with geometrical patterns which characterize the outer silhouette. Its interior decorations remain complete, including mirrorworks and chandeliers. Imarat-e-Brilyan combines a few luxurious chambers and halls and has likewise preserved the original interior decorations. Kahk-e-Abyas dates to the later years of Qajar rule and illustrates the continued reception and adaptation of architectural elements from 18th century Europe. Very special about Golestan Palace is its peaceful atmosphere and setting in the historic center, which ECOMOS believes needs to be preserved by strict protection of the height of surrounding buildings. In summary, ECOMOS recognizes the OUV of the property as a unique and rich testimony to the architectural language and decorative art during the Qajar era. The integrity of the property, despite earlier demolitions and at least one negative change to the visual perspectives from inside the gardens, remains sufficient but is extremely vulnerable to further development. ICOMOS considers that criteria 2 and 3 are justified and the conditions of authenticity and integrity have been met, while integrity remains, as said before, very vulnerable. ICOMOS considers that the conservation procedures are in principle effective, but that the area north of Shams al-Imara should be given more attention. Protection of the property is adequate, but ICOMOS recommends to strengthen the protective measures for the setting in light of the vulnerability of integrity. The present management is strongly focused on conservation, but does not include aspects related to risk preparedness, visitor management, or management of visual perspectives. ICOMOS recommends that a management plan be developed and approved. Last but not least, while the boundaries of the property are adequate, the buffer zone seems too small to ensure protection of the visual setting, and ICOMOS recommends its enlargement. Hence, ICOMOS recommends that this nomination be referred back to the state party to allow for expansion of the buffer zone, the development of a more comprehensive management system, including risk preparedness and management of the surroundings. ICOMOS also recommends to reduce the height of the referred to 6-story building in the buffer zone, to which the state party agreed in principle, and to identify an alternative location for the storage yard north of Shams al-Imara. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
I open the floor for discussion. So ICOMOS did propose a referral. Huh? Yes. I give the floor to India.
Thank you, Chair. We commend the State Party for bringing up this excellent nomination to the World Heritage Committee, and also to ICOMOS for giving us this comprehensive recommendation. What we note in the recommendation is that ICOMOS has accepted the outstanding universal value of Qajari architecture, and they have appreciated the comparative analysis provided in the dossier. They have also appreciated the integrity, authenticity aspects, and also protection measures taken by the state party. There is, of course, an issue that was there of the 6-story building, which has been accepted in the factual error. It was really a building that is 30 years old and not a recently constructed building. We also know that the state party has taken certain measures, and though the buffer zone right now is limited, they are ready to extend the buffer zone. And besides, without even that extension, the protection measures are very much in place. So we would like to give the floor to state party to explain those additional protection measures that they have taken. Thank you.
Give the floor to Japan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Japan also would like to echo Indian delegation, and Japan would like to support this site for inscription on condition that requirement for management plan, especially risk management, are satisfied. So I'd like to hear from state party about this point. Thank you.
Donne la parole à la France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La France se félicite de ce dossier d'inscription, car je crois que le palais du Golestan est un bien d'une qualité absolument incontestable. Je voulais simplement demander à l'ICOMOS les raisons de l'exclusion du critère 4. Si je voulais me permettre de lancer une petite pique amicale à l'ICOMOS, je dirais que j'ai l'impression que l'ICOMOS n'aime pas le critère 4 parce qu'il a été assez souvent écarté. Et il me semble que là, nous avons, il me semble, un type de construction tout à fait exemplaire. Et nous sommes, il me semble, dans le cas de l'application de ce critère. Et d'autre part, l'ICOMOS forme un certain nombre de recommandations concernant la zone tampon et la gestion du bien. Et je voudrais qu'on puisse demander à l'État partie si une partie des recommandations, au moins de l'ICOMOS, n'ont pas déjà été mises en œuvre ou commencé d'être mises en œuvre. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Call on Germany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ICOMOS confirms that this nomination fulfills the requirements for inscription now. Criteria 2 and 4, as well as the conditions of authenticity and integrity are met. The palace is legally protected and classified as national monument. Furthermore, a buffer zone is protected by legal regulations. In consistency with other draft decisions in front of us, we would like to see this nomination to be inscribed now. We are confident that the state party is ready to enlarge the buffer zone, and therefore we like, as I mentioned it, we like to see the inscription now and to ask for a report on the missing elements by the 1st February of 2015. Thank you very much.
I give the floor to Iraq, please.
شكرا جزيلا سيدي الرئيس. لا شك أننا أزاء قطعة فريدة غزيرة بالملامح المعمارية والزخرفة التي عكست ملامح الفن الفارسي بفتراته العديدة، خاصة القجارية منها. وبغض النظر عن الأهمية السياسية باعتباره مكانا للسلطة قديما، إلا أنه مدرسة لدراسة هذه الفنون الأصيلة. نطلب سماع المزيد من الدولة الطرف. شكرا جزيلا.
J'arrive, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Avant même d'écouter l'État partie, je pense que, à la lumière donc de la présentation du dossier par l'ICOMOS, les conditions essentielles sont remplies donc pour l'inscription de ce site dans la liste du patrimoine mondial. Donc nous souscrivons à l'option d'inscription de ce site. Merci.
La Malaisie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Malaysia supports Germany that this site has met all the requirements, and we too believe that it is ready for inscription. Thank you.
Call on South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa would like to align itself with the sentiments of most state parties. We believe that the OUV has been met and that by and large the management system is in place, so we support inscription of the site. Thank you, Chair.
I call on United Arab Emirates, please.
الإمارات تهني الدولة الطرف على هذا الموقع الفريد وتشيد بدور الإيكوموس والتقرير الوافي الذي بين لنا أهم مميزات هذا البناء الغني بالتنوع وبالفنون والعراقة. ونعتقد أنه ومن واقع تقرير إيكوموس نفسه أن هذا الموقع قد احتوى على الشروط الأساسية للإدراج، ومع تقديرنا للمشاغل التي أشارت إليها إيكوموس إلا أننا نثق بأن الدولة الطرف قادرة على الوفاء بها كتوصيات قابلة للإنجاز في كما عبرت عن ذلك ألمانيا والجزائر وماليزيا. نحن ندعم هذا الترشيح.
Give the floor to Russia.
Спасибо, господин президент, господин председатель. Мы хотели бы сказать, что представлена замечательная номинация, удивительное архитектурное сооружение, которое полностью соответствует всемирной универсальной ценности. Что касается вопроса защиты и буферной зоны, мы знаем, насколько сложна эта проблема, когда объект находится в городской среде. Но страна открыта к действию, и я думаю, с этими задачами не справиться. Мы вместе с остальными странами поддерживаем решение и предложение включения этого объекта в список. Спасибо.
Call on Serbia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Serbian delegations wishes to echo the previous speakers and to congratulate the State Party and to thank ICOMOS for approving the outstanding universal value of this exceptional site, and we also wish to suggest the inscription of the site to the World Heritage List. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
I give the floor to Qatar, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. ونحن بدورنا نود أن نؤيد كل ما جاء على لسان الوفود الصديقة الأخرى، ونؤيد تسجيل هذا الموقع الجميل، ونشكر الأيكوموس على عملها الجيد، ونشكر الدولة الطرف على ملفها الجيد كذلك. شكرا.
Mudia, you have the floor. Mudia, you have the floor. Cambodge, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'étais un petit peu rêveur. Voilà. Le Cambodge félicite l'Iran pour ce bien et soutient son inscription sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Merci à l'ICOMOS pour ce dossier. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I to invite the State Party to take the floor. Iran.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for granting us the floor. Well, having submitted a full report on the nomination titled Golestan Palace in a timely manner and in the form of the factual errors report, of course, also distributing a book and a series of documents on the same property among the distinguished committee members in the course of the past few days, we would like to bring to the following to the arguments to the attention of the committee. Golestan Palace, as was introduced to the distinguished committee members, enjoys great importance and outstanding creative values in art and architecture, to the extent that it is unanimously referred to as the Museum of the Qajar era, Iran of the 18th and 19th centuries. Combining Iranian and European architecture, the historical complex continued to function as the prototype for a number of monuments and properties in art and architecture, both contemporary to it and following it for a considerable period. Going to the report by ICOMOS, the report mentions 2 points of concern, of which one was corrected in the course of the present meeting, and we are not going to refer to it. The second, and of course this was corrected in the course of the factual errors report. But the second issue regards the submitting state to provide an extended buffer zone for the site, as explained extensively through the additional information submitted. The mentioned extended buffer zone already exists on the officially effective master maps and plan of the city and covers the historical city center. The mentioned zone includes in itself 4 historical districts, namely Doulat, Sanglach, Bazar, and Odlajan, the first among which encompasses Golestan Palace. The extended zone has already been included in the master plan of the city, as witnessed by the books that have been distributed among the distinguished committee members. As a result, Mr. Chairman, we would like to bring to your attention that both of the cases have been solved and that the nomination seems to be ready for inscription. Of course, regarding the management, plan management issues, I would like to add that this issue is also taken care of in the master plan of the city. Thank you very much for granting us the floor.
I call on ICOMOS to make more comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. We were asked by the Honourable Delegate from France regarding Criterion 4, and I'd first like to take the opportunity to assure that ICOMOS values all criteria that it has been given by the committee. We have no preference for any of them, and it's certainly not the case that we do not like Criterion 4. In fact, Criterion 4 is a wonderful criterion which recognizes an outstanding example of a certain type of architecture, technology, landscape, or other developments. So it is mostly related to typology, the development of a very unique or new typology in something. And we felt that the uniqueness of Golestan is that it combines two very different typologies, that is European and Persian architectural influences, which both have developed their types. And here the special aspect is that those two types have been combined into a synthesis of both, which, however, we don't consider something completely new in itself, but see the main value in this synthesis, which is therefore better recognized in criterion 2 as the interchange of values reflected in this architecture. And that's why we felt that criterion 2 is the more appropriate one to manage this property in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
A call on Thailand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After listening to the state party, also of ECOMOS and the previous speaker, Thailand joined the other speaker to support the committee to inscribe this site to the list of the World Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I call on Colombia, please.
Gracias, señor presidente. Después de leer con detenimiento este expediente, de oír las aclaraciones por parte del Estado parte, después de haber revisado también la evaluación que hace ICOMOS, nosotros estamos dispuestos a respaldar la inscripción del Palacio Golestan en la lista del Patrimonio Mundial y felicitamos de antemano a la delegación de Irán. Gracias.
I call on Japan, please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much for the explanation about criterion 4 by ICOMOS. And I have one question. Is fusion sometimes create very important architectural types all over the world? Like in Japan, it's architectural style with Japanese and European or other Chinese styles create important fusions. So that means I wonder, such kind of prototypes or its architecturally important types of different cultures should fall in the criterion 2 or going to 4. We have some questions about that. So that means in criterion 4 could be applied or not. This case is in this kind of fusion or something should be important typology or within a prototype in Iran or is in this subculture, this region. That is my question and also my opinion. Thank you very much.
I could more like to reply.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, there's not so much I can add to what we've said previously. When ICOMOS considered the question, it felt that in this particular case it had not created a new or unique type of building or type of architecture that could be considered significant of a stage in human history, but that really the synthesis and exchange over time was more significant than a particular stage in human history and a unique type that had been created here. So once again, ICOMOS considered that two better reflected this synthesis in this particular case.
Thank you. I call on Iran.
بعد سماع توضيحات الدولة الطرف العراق يؤيد تسجيل الموقع على قائمة التراث. شكرا.
I call on rapporteur to present the text.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vous prie de mettre la décision. On a devant nous la décision 37,8B26, Palais de Golestan, Iran. Je vous prie de regarder, on a une proposition d'amendement soumise par India, par l'Inde. Et j'aimerais bien que vous regardiez les paragraphes qui ont été proposés. Je vous rappelle, on a une unanimité d'opinion. Je pense qu'il faut inscrire le bien. Donc, je pense que dans ce cas, on peut procéder plus vite. Dans le paragraphe 1, on rappelle le document qui fait référence aux lettres d'erreur factuelle. Paragraphe 2, nouveau proposé par l'Inde. Ensuite, paragraphe 3. Au lieu de renvoyer, on inscrit. On garde les critères, même si on a eu une petite discussion. Donc, si vous voulez rajouter un critère et s'exprimer plus, on est prêt à le faire. Il y a la France.
Pour être cohérent avec notre déclaration, excusez-moi. Oui. Pour être cohérent avec notre déclaration, évidemment, nous proposons d'ajouter le critère 4.
Nous appuyons la proposition de la France. Merci.
The floor to India.
Thank you, Chair. We also endorse the addition of criteria 4. Thank you.
Merci. On a une proposition de biffer les paragraphes A et B dans le paragraphe 3, mais on les a repris plus tard. Vous allez voir dans la proposition de l'Inde, il y a des choses qui sont à propos de la valeur exceptionnelle universelle. C'est la même chose comme hier, donc c'est préparé. Numéro 5. Je vous rappelle que le secrétariat, en fait, il a une lettre d'erreur factuelle, donc c'était récente, donc c'était faux. On a rectifié ça, mais l'Inde a proposé de supprimer le paragraphe A, ancienne 3A en entier. Et on a proposé 2 nouveaux paragraphes. Le petit a, je peux vous lire lentement. Développer un programme de sensibilisation du public sur la préparation aux risques au sein de la zone tampon adoptée. Et le petit b, on a gardé l'original. Voilà, c'est à vous, Monsieur le Président, de demander les comités, s'ils sont d'accord.
I see no objection. So now we are going to adopt the text, decision number 37,8b.26. So the decision is adopted. So, of the entire committee, I would like to congratulate Iran for the inception of this site. I give the floor to Iran for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the floor. Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran to the 13th-17th session of the World Heritage Committee, I would like to start my short remarks with extending our sincerely thanks to the royal government and people of Cambodia for their great efforts and warm hospitality in holding the magnificent event we are attending in. Our thanks will also go with the distinguished members of the World Heritage Committee, the World Heritage Center, and ICOMOS for their continuous contributions in inscribing our properties on the World Heritage List. Mr. Chairman, regarding the background of close cooperation between our country and the World Heritage Center and the advisory bodies in management, conservation of Iran World Heritage, and the process of nomination, we hope that with the support of distinguished committee members regarding our other nominations, this fruitful cooperation will continue. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Golestan Palace constitutes the 16th World Heritage Property of Iran and the first property of the capital, Tehran. The Islamic Republic of Iran takes great pride in the achievement today. Our people, and especially the residents of the capital, have eagerly followed the procedures. We are sure the news of the decision today will provide them with great joy and enthusiasm, and at the same time will give them great pride in having a share in safeguarding the heritage of humanity. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, once again for the floor. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative from Iran. Now we came to another property, cultural landscape of Maiman, Iran, Islamic Republic of Iran. Draft decision 37,8b.27. I invite now ICOMOS to present the nomination of the cultural landscape of Maiman, Iran. But before I yield the floor to the Secretariat, Mr. Balsamo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder that also on this nomination we received a factual letter, which is to be found on page 29 of the English version and page 27 of the French version of the information document 8B4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. Here is the location map of the property in Kano province. Next slide, please. Maymand is an isolated semi-desert area at the head of a valley in the southern end of Iran's central range of mountains. Surrounding the property on three sides are dramatic mountain peaks rising to around 2,000 meters. The people of Maymand are agro-pastoralists, herding sheep and cattle on the mountain pastures, where they have temporary spring, summer, and autumn settlements. The nomination dossier provides very detailed information on this agricultural system. Next slide, please. During the winter months, the farmers live lower down in troglodytic houses carved out of soft Karma rock. These are reputed to have been lived in continuously for many millennia. In this extremely arid area, in order to provide enough for crops and animals, water was traditionally harvested from multiple sources: springs, rainfall tanks, a network of seasonal rivers, and subterranean pools channeled through underground kanats. Next slide, please. In terms of categories of cultural property, this is a site. It is also nominated as a cultural landscape. Next slide, please. This map shows you in red the outline of the property, and in blue the buffer zone surrounding it. Next slide, please. The agropastoral system is a distinctive type of seasonal migration, which involves people moving with their animals to different pastures, traditionally 4 and more recently 3 times of year. Next slide, please. This is a diagram of this 4-phase transhumance system. Three of the stages in this involve temporary houses, while the fourth, the troglodytic houses, are permanent structures. The second type, Esham, is the one that now has very limited use, so the system is in practice more or less a 3-phase system. Next slide, please. This Sar-e-Algol are the settlements used from the end of winter until late spring and are on the southern fields. They consist of groups of houses and shelter for animals. There are two types of houses, circular ones, semi-underground, to shelter people from the wind, with a low dry stone wall and a roof covering a wood and thatch of wild thistles. And the second types, above ground, built with dry stone walls and a conical roof of branches. Next time, please. This is the second stage, the Esham. Houses here were used for a very short period in early spring at places where wild almonds could be collected. Traditionally, the houses were tents of goat hair or shelters of brushwood, as you can see here. This is the second stage of the four-stage process, and this is the one that has almost now disappeared. Next one, please. This is the third stage, the Sar-e-Bag houses, and these are used during the summer and early autumn, and are sited near seasonal rivers. Cattle are collected together in a roofless stone enclosure. Next one, please. Next slide, please. In inclement weather, the substantial houses are constructed with tall walls and conical roofs. And when they're not occupied, the roof covering is removed. Next slide, please. And when the weather is hot, their structures are light, as you can see here. Next slide. Around the summer villages are terraces near seasonal rivers for growing wheat and barley, and there are the remains of now ruined watermills, one of which has been restored, as well as pits for boiling and straining grape juice, which you can see here are still in use. Next slide, please. In the fourth and last stage of the year, people move to the troglodytic houses of Maymand, which are used during late autumn and winter. They're carved out of the soft rock on both sides of a shallow valley and constructed in layers of up to 5 houses in height. Around 400 of these houses, next slide please, have been identified, and traditionally they were used for livings, storage and for animal shelters. Most of them have only one opening, the door, and through which light comes in, but a few have skylights. Next one, please. And a few more details, as you can see here, are of the troglodytic houses. Next one, please. 123 units are still intact and currently used, and around 40 are still inhabited. And these 40 have been restored over the past 10 years. Next slide, please. As you can see from this plan, the houses are small, one main room with 2 or 3 storage areas and shelters for animals. Next slide, please. Also in the property are so-called fire temples, which you can see here, although the dossier indicates that there appears to be perhaps little evidence for that particular use. Next one, please. There are larger structures also exist, one used for a mosque, and there's also a former bathhouse. Next one. Within the village, steps are being taken to improve buildings by cladding concrete ones, more recent concrete ones, in stone. Next slide. And to provide better amenities for local residents, such as parks and shops. Next slide, please. The troglodytic village is a main tourist attraction, and on certain days in each of the past few years, the number of visitors has exceeded the appropriate limit that has been set. But there is currently a strong control of the number of visitors by a special ecological police who have the task of visitor control, and helped by local guides and even the local community. There is a slight concern that the village could become a set piece for tourists, given the huge numbers that it attracts. Next slide, please. The 2 main issues of this dossier relate first to its overall value, whether or not the landscape has outstanding universal value, and secondly, to whether the agro-pastoral system is sustainable, and to a degree these two are related. The comparative analysis compares first of all the troglodytic dwellings with other rock-cut dwellings around the world, and secondly sites associated with phased migration. And from this analysis, the rock-cut dwellings on their own cannot be seen as exceptional. The phased migration is compared with other societies, mainly in Iran, where people move on a seasonal basis. The dossier makes clear that there is no common view on the delineation and boundaries of agropastoral communities in that area. But Maymand is apparently different in that farmers have a three-phased approach rather than other numbers of seasonal moves. ICOMOS considers there are many reasons to differentiate transhumance pastoral systems. Pastoralism or agropastoralism reflects a host of different socio-economic cultural practices. Comparisons are more meaningful if they can be made on the basis of a combination of these practices that underpin the agricultural regimes in a particular place and connected to features of the cultural landscape that has resulted from this interaction between people and their environment. We consider that further comparisons are needed within the geocultural region, which could be seen to extend from the Eastern Mediterranean further east, and undertaken on the basis of analysis of landscapes as a reflection of their social and economic backgrounds, in order to demonstrate how Maymand might be considered to be a very exceptional manifestation of agropastoralism. Next slide, please. The main potential threat to the overall landscape is how such a tiny economic unit in a remote valley might be sustained over time in relation to its vulnerability to a decrease in population through migration to nearby towns. In the past century, the population has decreased from 3,000 inhabitants to the current 850. And in the winter, the population is even lower at around 145. It is easy to understand the migration away from the area over winter when temperatures fall and there are few modern amenities. Nevertheless, the population does increase during weekends when many owners return from the nearby town. However, the number of Argols, the temporary settlements, has reduced in the last few years due to the decreasing number of pastoralists. In the nominated area, there remain 8 that still lived and used by families who have sufficient cattle to ensure their survival. In other parts of the world, support for marketing produce has proved beneficial when the food the farmers grow is in some way special or scarce. In the case of Maymand, that does not seem to be a possibility. The agropastoral system was geared towards self-sufficiency rather than producing a surplus for trade. An increase in stock numbers could anyway upset the delicate balance with nature. ICOMOS considers that an overall plan for the sustainability of Maymand Valley would be beneficial to address the rising expectations of people living in the valley, and how individual underground houses can be brought up to date in terms of the services needs also perhaps to be addressed. And one overriding concern is whether the size of this socio-economic unit, based on only 58 families, is adequate if in the future agropastoral activities in the neighbouring valleys do not survive. Would this small island of transhumance be viable? Next slide, please. We have no concerns about integrity and authenticity. In terms of criteria, we do not think these have been justified at the current time, but there perhaps is certainly potential for the possibility of looking in the future at criterion 3. Next slide, please. The boundaries and conservation are satisfactory. We consider the legal protection needs strengthening. And in order to strengthen management, there is need for commitment to resources into the future. ICOMOS would like to say that the attempts made to support the conservation of the village and encourage the involvement of local farming communities is to be commended. Considerable funds have been put in to support this work and to provide better services for villagers. Next slide, please. In conclusion, ICOMOS recommends that this nomination be deferred in order to allow the state party to set the property into its wider agropastoral context. And we suggest that that perhaps could be supported by an expert workshop in order to develop a clearer understanding of how this property might be considered as an outstanding reflection of transhumance in this region. Next slide, please. We also have some further recommendations about national protection and land use strategy, the involvement of local communities, and a conservation strategy for the troglodytic village. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Open the floor for comment, please. I call on Iraq. I call on Iraq, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our country is a neighbor of the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have read the report by the State Party thoroughly. We are interested in knowing more about this property, since, to our knowledge, this site is quite outstanding over the region, especially considering the special climatic conditions we observe there, and the way the people have succeeded in coping with the harsh surrounding nature. We are convinced that Myanmar is liable of inscription on the World Heritage List, to as the 21 active qanat, as well as the special 3-part nomadic movement of the community to an exceptional troglodytic village, and to other habitat for cattle breeding and recreating the ecosystem suitable for living in. Particularly, the traditional method of gardening they enjoy was of great interest. Regarding all these, we would like to congratulate the Islamic Republic of Iran for providing the committee with a new concept of cultural landscape, that is, to promote the concept. On the other hand, and to bring the committee activities in line with the spirit of the conventions. Regarding this, my delegation would like to invite the State Party to present the committee members with more information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think it's a chain from the request for change from deferral to inscription. Yes. Now I call on Estonia.
Thank you, Chair. Estonia would like to congratulate Iran for proposing this semi-nomadic cultural landscape for inscription. The sites inscribed on the World Heritage List from Iran so far, with the exception of BAM cultural landscape, which has been removed from the danger list just a few days ago, are examples of exceptional architectural ensembles, including Golestan, we just inscribed, or architectural remains. This nomination represents an altogether different type of heritage, and this should be commended. However, Estonia would rather agree with ICOMOS and support the draft decision prepared by the Secretariat to allow the State Party more time to elaborate the nomination, including all the substantial new information about the management of this property, the activities of the community, and the rock art of the site, which was provided in the 92-page-long factual errors letter, which actually was not a factual errors letter, dated 2nd of June 2013. So just to allow the State Party to elaborate the nomination, we would prefer it deferred at this stage. Thank you.
On Mexico, please.
Gracias, señor presidente. México está totalmente sorprendido por la candidatura de este paisaje cultural de Myanmar en el sur de la península de Irán, y donde realmente se nota una serie de factores que son importantísimos para enriquecer la lista de Patrimonio Mundial. Agradecemos justamente esta posibilidad de que la lista se viera enriquecida. Ya este año tuvimos 3 inscripciones sobre el desierto de Namibia, el desierto de Altar, del Pinacate y la zona desértica de Xinjiang y Tianshan en China. En este caso estamos hablando de un paisaje cultural enormemente complejo y donde sobreviven durante, como dice el informe de ICOMOS, donde sobreviven modos de vida milenarios y que son muy frágiles al día de hoy ante las sociedades cambiantes y el desarrollo que todos los países enfrentan. Creemos que este es un hecho fundamental para tomar en cuenta lo valioso de la propuesta de Irán. Antes de tomar cualquier decisión sobre el tema de la inscripción o el aplazamiento de este importantísimo bien, nos gustaría escuchar también al Estado parte para saber cuáles son las medidas que el gobierno iraní ha tomado con referencia a las recomendaciones que ICOMOS hace, porque nos parece que con una decisión, con una información que el Estado parte nos provea a los miembros del comité, en esa medida podríamos saber qué tanto se pueden satisfacer ahora mismo estas demandas o tendrían que esperar algún plazo razonable. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
I call on India, please.
Thank you, Chair. This committee meeting will be long remembered not only for your leadership, but for the recognition of desert sites, desert landscapes, unprecedented, the number that are coming on, and that is the welcome recognition of a heritage that has not yet received its due. Mr. Chair, when we went through this file, this nomination dossier, we were increasingly astounded and began to wonder why this was not on the list of World Heritage. This is a jewel that should long have been recognized. Let me get to the specifics. This landscape is actually a desert cultural landscape. It is not transhuman's pastoral systems, a far more limited categorization that ICOMOS has preferred. The varied manifestations, this is a whole way of life, this is a whole system that even if it is shrinking, deserves to be recognized, deserves to be listed. Mr. Chair, I wonder just how much man has been shaped by the environment, and this is a sobering reflection on that. In this day and age of climate change, this is one of the strongest messages that this committee could send, that this is an example of how man has adapted to the harsh environment in ways that I at least did not know about. I've noted the ICOMOS recommendation for a study across the Mediterranean, across West Asia. This is something that should have been done or could have been done by ICOMOS, and the information, the content provided to the state party, it is for ICOMOS to advise state parties. It is not for us as a committee to hold up a nomination and inscription only to give time for a study that certainly should be done. I think all of this should be studied in far, far more depth. Mr. Chair, Mexico has, I think, given us a very incisive analysis and given us a basis for a recommendation that we could take forward for inscription. This is valuable. We must preserve it. I would support inscription, Mr. Chair.
Je donne la parole à la Suisse.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Suisse partage les points de vue de nos collègues qu'il s'agit d'une nomination très intéressante et importante, un paysage culturel particulier. Toutefois, si nous avons pu souscrire à l'inscription du palais Golestan qu'on avait discuté juste avant, il y a une différence ici parce qu'une question fondamentale reste, et c'est celle de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle qui est à ce stade pas établie. En d'autres termes, il nous semble qu'il nous manque les bases qui pourraient prouver en quoi le mode de vie de ce groupe, de ce relativement petit groupe de la population, dans une relativement petite zone dans la région est exceptionnel, est universel. Ce n'est pas la question de la spécificité, parce qu'il est évident, quand on regarde le dossier, que cette tradition de l'agropastoralisme de transhumance a ses particularités. Mais il y en a d'autres groupes de population qui ont des modes de vie particuliers dans la région, et c'est pour ça que nous souscrivons à la demande de l'ICOMOS que cette étude doit être étendue et que l'analyse comparative, qui fait partie intégrante du dossier de candidature, doit être étendue pour qu'on ait les preuves qu'il s'agit ici véritablement d'un site exceptionnel et universel. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je donne la parole à la Mali, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, je risque de me tromper en disant que cette session de 2013 a été celle du désert, bien des déserts. Parce que, en plus de la Namibie, du Qatar et de la Chine, nous sommes en présence d'un paysage culturel menacé. Il est vivant, mais il est menacé. Il s'agit d'un mode de vie troglodyte qui a existé depuis des millénaires, mais qui est en train de subir les pressions du tourisme. Et nous sommes en présence d'un paysage culturel vivant, intéressant. Et l'ICOMOS, dans son exposé, nous a fait part de la manière dont ce bien est protégé. Il y a des délimitations qui sont précises, il y a une zone tampon qui est également précise, mais l'UNESCO a surtout introduit dans son propos qu'il y a eu des erreurs factuelles. J'aurais souhaité être un peu mieux édifié par rapport à ces erreurs factuelles. Monsieur le Président, nous sommes en présence d'un village troglodyte. Un village troglodyte des millénaires, ou bien des millénaires, un mode de vie qui est en disparition. Et en inscrivant ce paysage culturel, nous contribuerons également à participer à la préservation de ce mode de vie exceptionnel. Je vous remercie.
Algérie, vous avez la parole. Algérie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous félicitons l'État partie et l'ICOMOS pour ce dossier. Nous nous sommes particulièrement intéressés à ce dossier car il recouvre certains aspects qui nous rappellent ce que nous avons et ce que nous connaissons un peu dans nos régions sahariennes, notamment dans leur périphérie semi-aride. Si on fait cette association très originale entre la pratique agropastorale, l'habitat troglodyte, les représentations rupestres, les sites archéologiques, le système traditionnel de partage et de distribution de l'eau et les réponses techniques et culturelles apportées par les populations à tous ces éléments. Et nous remercions l'ICOMOS pour avoir relevé tous ces éléments dans le rapport, un rapport très bien documenté, voire même détaillé sur certains aspects, notamment historiques et chronologiques. Cependant, et de notre point de vue, partant de notre propre expérience, nous considérons que l'évaluation a été quelque peu catégorique, voire même géométrique, si je pourrais dire, portant uniquement sur des entités et des catégories et non sur leur interaction multiple. Nous sommes en face d'un projet de paysage culturel où il s'agit non pas de sérier des entités et des catégories, mais de déterminer les caractères d'interaction et d'indissociabilité entre les éléments naturels et culturels dans le sens du critère 5. Il ne s'agit pas pour nous de démontrer que les habitats troglodytes soient exceptionnels en eux-mêmes, ou que les maisons souterraines soient si singulières. Il s'agit plutôt de démontrer la relation significative et intelligible entre tous ces attributs et les migrations, en 3 phases qui ne se déroulent qu'en ce lieu particulier au monde selon les informations que nous avons. C'est donc dans la dynamique de l'interaction entre tous les facteurs et acteurs que doit être saisie la VUE. Il s'agit en fait d'appréhender l'authenticité et l'intégrité de cette interaction et non de la sérier selon les éléments qui la composent. Nous ne pensons pas qu'une étude thématique internationale sur la transhumance, telle que proposée dans les recommandations, pourrait apporter un plus dans le cadre de la démarche qui est préconisée dans le rapport. Les informations qui nous ont été données par l'État partie semblent, à notre sens, rejoindre notre point de vue. Et nous souhaitons l'écouter pour nous éclairer sur cette question qui a déterminé l'option du différé à laquelle l'Algérie ne pourrait adhérer en l'état. Merci.
I yield the floor to Qatar, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. موقع ميمنت في إيران. سيد الرئيس، بالنسبة لساكني الصحراء فإن للحياة معنى فريدا قائم على استخدام الموارد الطبيعية المحدودة جدا في محيطهم. وبالنسبة لموقع ميمنت الذي أمامنا فإنه محاط في أطرافه بحدود ذات طبيعة قاسية جدا. إن هذا الموقع المقترح من إيران يوجه اللجنة الكريمة للتعامل بنظرة مختلفة مع المواقع الصحراوية New Concept. ومن خلال هذه النظرة المختلفة فستفتح آفاق جديدة للدول في المنطقة للتعامل مع أراضيها المصنفة كأراضي صحراوية. بحسب الخبراء فإن الحركة في هذه المناطق الصحراوية يمكن تتبعها من 8 إلى 10,000 سنة مضت. إننا نساند ما ذهبت إليه بعض الدول الأعضاء في اللجنة في الحاجة لتوسيع ونشر الرؤية الجديدة الخاصة بالأراضي الصحراوية وإعطاء أهمية للأراضي الصغيرة نسبيا التي تتمتع بالتعايش بين الإنسان والطبيعة. ونذكر هنا بأننا بحاجة لتسجيل مواقع صحراوية بشكل أكبر، لذلك فإننا نؤيد تسجيل هذا الموقع. وشكرا.
J'appelle l'État parti d'Iran. Veuillez de prendre la parole, please. Je m'excuse, la Serbie demande la parole. Donc je donne la parole à la Serbie tout d'abord.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Listening carefully to the previous speaker, I must say that no one mentioned local community. Actually, the people that are living in those troglodyte habitats. And I feel that it is of crucial importance that they are committed to preserving their sites and their villages and their way of life. So I would like to invite the State Party of Iran to maybe give us a few informations about that, because I think that would be the basis of all other protections, and I'm quite sure that the State of Iran will provide all the necessity protection that belongs to the state, but then we have to have a basis in the field of Maiman. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Donc, j'invite l'État parti d'Iran de prendre la parole, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for granting the floor to us once again. First of all, I would like to start by expressing our sincere thanks to you, Mr. Chairman, and the distinguished members of the committee for the time they have specified for putting forward questions. Due to the short time available to us, we will try to be brief in presenting our arguments in a more or less outline-like manner, of course. Regarding the distinctive features of Meyman, we would like to bring to the attention of the distinguished committee members that Meyman is constituted by a cultural landscape at the heart of the Iranian desert, Kerman province, with the following outstanding universal values. 1. Meyman manifests as an outstanding combination of troglodytic architecture in the central Iranian desert, excavated through utilizing an outstanding traditional knowledge on architecture on the one hand, and of a detailed knowledge of the natural geological mass of old activities. The knowledge has resulted in the formation of 400 excavated spaces, all having survived as intact to the present time. 2. Meyman presents an example of a unique culture over the region that brings together the tangible and intangible heritages in the context of the prevailing desert conditions. The intangible side is constituted by the body of native traditional knowledge that recreates the ecosystem by bringing in the basic elements from the wild surrounding environment and enjoys its outstanding features, including pastures, herbs, nutritionally rich wild products, among the other features. And bringing in, of course, water through 21 qanat systems that are active. Due to the fact that it is surrounded by a vast arid desert, the Meyman cultural landscape provides the world with a new concept of cultural landscape and is able to promote the customary understanding that is based upon the familiar, mostly European landscape types, thus promoting the spirit of the 1972 convention. The pastoral and or nomadic lifestyle of the people of Meyman manifests as an outstanding, since it is based on an annually respected three-phase migratory movement habit that is completely different from the ordinarily observed transhuman cultures over the region, as well as throughout the world, in that it does not manifest as a movement of few individuals who are involved in cattle breeding. Meyman enjoys the existence of a successful traditional management plan that has kept it alive through its long history on the one hand and has contributed to proper interaction between its people, external interested organization, and surroundings. These have defined it with a management plan that is completely different from that of the other familiar cultural landscapes in the world. I would like to add that regarding the question put forward by the distinguished delegate of Mexico, this management plan, the interaction between our government and the management plan consists of just helping and supporting the successful traditional management that exists and has successfully functioned in the landscape. Anyway, I would like to conclude, Mr. Chairman, by saying that the components of this village could be grouped together as being an active troglodytic village, the traditional agricultural and cattle breeding calendar of Meyman. There is a calendar, of course, since this 3 time phases over the region is quite unique. The traditional management system that has contributed to the survival of the phase lifestyle to the present time, and finally the traditional knowledge of Meymandi people on geological climatic conditions, on fauna, herbal medicine, and the other things. Thank you very much for your tolerance.
I invite ECOMOS to comment de faire des commentaires sur les avis différents des commentaires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ECOMOS certainly recognises what has come out strongly from this committee, that agropastoralism is of enormous importance in understanding cultural landscapes around the world. Just in terms of pure area, the agropastoralism is probably shaped more of the world than any other types of interaction. ECOMOS has already undertaken, perhaps I can just add for information, a thematic study for the Mediterranean region, and we are planning a future study of this particular cultural area. So we strongly support the idea of desert landscapes such as this being recognized on the World Heritage List. Our concern was to understand precisely how this could be done given the enormous areas that we have, and how Mainland may more definitely be able to set out its statements of outstanding universal value. The State Party, as I've already said, produced an excellent dossier which was full of very detailed information and provided supplementary information which I'm sure all members of the committee have seen. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Rapporteur, s'il vous plaît, présentez le texte.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. On a reçu des amendements de la part de l'Irak et on vous les présente. D'après la discussion qui a été menée dans la salle, on a une position de quelques membres du comité qui soutiennent la proposition de l'ICOMOS, et ensuite Irak, India, Mali, Qatar qui ont soutenu la position de Irak, donc d'inscrire le bien sur la liste. Donc il faut peut-être, Monsieur le Président, discuter là-dessus un peu plus, parce que ce ne sont pas des opinions qui pourraient être mises ensemble. Donc je ne pourrais pas proposer une solution parce que les États parties n'ont pas de même opinion. Et c'est sur le paragraphe 2 qu'il faut discuter plus avant. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je pense que pour faciliter la décision, je demande que les membres du comité qui soutiennent l'inscription parlent les premiers, oui, pour que le rapporteur puisse saisir des différentes opinions. Oui. Algérie, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, après avoir écouté les précisions de l'ICOMOS, l'Algérie souscrit donc à l'inscription de ce site sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Merci.
Merci. Oui, il y a d'autres commentaires. Rasia, you have the floor. Rasia, you have the floor. Yes.
Спасибо, господин президент. Мы считаем, что это уникальный тип жилья, который существует многие века. И здесь нам главное не ошибиться, потому что настолько это хрупкая структура, что в один какой-то момент мы будем принимать список наследия и сразу список наследия в опасности. Это возможно. Поэтому Российская Федерация поддерживает ту группу стран, которая предлагает внести этот объект в список всемирного наследия. Спасибо.
I call on United Arab Emirates, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. لقد انتظرنا لسماع وجهة نظر إيكوموس والدولة الطرف وأعضاء اللجنة، وكنا حريصين من البدء على أن ينظر إلى هذا الملف بعناية كبيرة، لأنه من الملفات الفريدة كموقع صحراوي يرصد الحياة ونمط حياة الناس لقرون ومن الزمن. نحن ندرك بعد ما سمعنا من كل الأطراف، نقدر مشاكل إيكوموس التي أشارت إليها، ولكن في تقديرنا أنه يمكن التعامل معها دون تأخير إدراج هذا الموقع لأهميته ولأن بقاءه خارج الإدراج يعرض للخطر أكثر، لذلك نحن نؤيد الإدراج.
Si je donne la parole à la France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ce dossier nous semble extrêmement intéressant, mais il nous semble que les études comparatives doivent encore être complétées. En ce sens, la France soutient la proposition de l'Estonie et de la Suisse. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Call on Estonia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Estonia would also like to address the issue of statement of outstanding universal value. We know that in case the nomination has been recommended for inscription or for referral, the statement of OUV has been prepared by the advisory bodies as the OUV has been demonstrated. This is not the case when the advisory bodies have recommended to defer a nomination, because the OUV simply has not been demonstrated at this stage. The statement of OUV is widely acknowledged as the basis for the future protection and management of the property, and this is not something that can be easily be drafted on the spot. We need credible statements in order to properly reflect the fundamental principle of OUV through a World Heritage List. This issue was also highlighted in the external auditor report, and the working group that produced an implementation plan for his recommendations considered it to be a high priority. Estonia would like to recall that the working group invited the committee not to adopt any statements of outstanding universal value on a provisional basis and not to inscribe sites whose statements of OUV have not been finalized. Thank you.
I call on South Africa, please.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to ICOMOS' presentation and different interventions by other state committee members, and again ICOMOS trying to respond to some of the issues raised, South Africa is convinced that this site can be inscribed by this committee, and we would like to support inscription. Thanks.
On Germany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Germany is convinced that the site could demonstrate OUV. A lot of work has been done, but still the criteria have to be confirmed. We are of the opinion that more time is needed. Therefore, Germany is in favor to stay with the deferral at the moment. Thank you.
Oui, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres commentaires, please? Aujourd'hui, nous avons compté 8 contre 4. Oui. Donc, s'il y a des autres commentaires ou non? Pour les membres qui n'ont pas pris la parole, est-ce que nos collègues veulent exprimer les avis? 8, 4, 12 seulement, oui. Donc il reste 9 encore qui n'ont pas exprimé. Donc nous avons encore beaucoup de nominations pour travailler. Oui, alors il faut réfléchir pour la décision. Nous avons 8 contre 4. 8 ne représente pas la majorité de 2 tiers. Oui, donc nous ne pouvons pas prendre la décision sur le nombre 8. Et il y a une différence des avis. 4 expriment pour différal, et 8 c'est pour inscription. Je pense qu'il faut trouver un compromis. Vous voyez, si nous pouvons décider référal, c'est le milieu, c'est entre le référal et entre l'inscription. Mais il y a la solution de référal. Oui, c'est un compromis que nous pouvons faire. Colombie, s'il vous plaît. Colombie, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Evidentemente es un caso difícil, es un caso en el que nosotros reconocemos que hay valores muy importantes, bastante evidentes, de unas formas de vida incluso que tienden a desaparecer rápidamente, con lo cual también creemos que hay una urgencia. Sin embargo, también creemos que sería recomendable poder ajustar ese expediente y de acuerdo a lo que usted ha planteado, señor presidente, nosotros iríamos por una posición media en la cual podríamos devolver o sugeriríamos devolver al Estado parte el expediente para que en un corto tiempo pueda complementar algunos asuntos que todavía están pendientes. Gracias.
Merci, la délégation de Colombie. Cambodge, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Après avoir écouté le débat, le Cambodge rejoint la Colombie pour le renvoi.
I call on India, please.
Thank you, Chair. There is no doubt from the discussions that this is an outstanding site. More importantly, a site that is so important that delay or too much delay is going to threaten the site. Secondly, there are lessons to be learned from here, and I hope we leave this committee with those lessons. Chair, with your permission, I'm going to propose, and I hope that other members of the committee will support. I hope the State Party will understand. I hope you will give the floor to the State Party. I'm going to propose a referral, but with a strong endorsement from the committee that this is much too important a site to keep hanging. You will require a strong commitment from the advisory body that they will work very closely with the State Party over the next year to make sure that at the next session, which incidentally is in a state, in a country, a member that is also very committed to the promotion and preservation of our desert heritage. I'm going to propose a referral. I would like that commitment from ICOMOS. I would like the support from other members of the committee. I would like the floor to be given to the State Party. Thank you, Chair.
Oui, merci, son Excellence l'ambassadeur. Mais avant d'inviter l'État parti, je pense qu'il y a des membres du comité qui ont demandé la parole. Donc, je donne la parole à la Sénégal, la délégation de Sénégal, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous sommes dans différentes positions un peu divisées sur ce site qui est quand même très intéressant. Mais comme on l'a dit, l'Inde, nous voulons encore donner la parole à l'État parti pour plus d'informations. Merci.
Avant d'inviter l'État parti, je voudrais savoir, est-ce qu'il y a les membres du comité qui opposent le référent? Il n'y a pas d'opposition? Oui, aucune objection. Oui. Mexico, please.
Gracias, señor presidente. No, nosotros quisiéramos reiterar nuestra posición que retoma plenamente lo expresado por el delegado de la India de reconocer primero el valor universal excepcional de este extraordinario sitio. Nos parece que es único y que está perfectamente manifiesto en todo el documento que nos proporciona ICOMOS. También en un afán de resolver la encrucijada en la que nos encontramos, también seríamos de la postura de devolverlo para que fuera un corto tiempo, pero con el compromiso de que hubiera justamente un acompañamiento para que esto fuera presentado en el más corto plazo. Muchas gracias.
I call on Qatar, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. نحن نتفق تماما مع ما ذهبت إليه الهند في توصيف الوضع. نحن دولة في أغلبها يعني دولة صحراوية، وقد اختفى للأسف نمط الحياة البدوية لدينا، لدرجة أن الناس عندنا عندما تسمح الأجواء ويعني تسمح الظروف الطبيعية درجة الحرارة تسمح، يقومون بالذهاب للصحراء والعيش تحت الخيام، ولكن مع كل وسائل الحديثة للاتصال بما فيها الدش والبغبل. وهذا يدل على أن الناس بحاجة إلى العيش في هذا النمط القديم. لقد انحسرت وللأسف ذهب هذا النمط تماما تقريبا في دولنا في دول الخليج، ولكن في إيران يبقى هذا النمط موجود، ونعتقد بأن الديفيرال يعني سيؤدي إلى تفاقم الوضع، ولكن إعطاء الدولة الطرف فرصة لسنة فمع العمل كما ذكر زميلنا من الهند بشكل وثيق مع الآيكوموس، نعتقد بأن هذا هو الحل الأمثل في هذا الوضع. وشكرا.
S'il y a les objections au renvoi, oui, je n'ai vu aucune objection. Vous voyez. Je suppose que notre comité sont d'avis pour le renvoi. Dans ce cas-là, est-ce que je peux aller directement à l'État parti? Oui. Donc j'invite l'État parti, l'Iran, de prendre parole.
Thank you very much once again, Mr. Chairman, for granting the floor to us. Our delegation would like to start with expressing sincere thanks to the distinguished committee members and to you, Mr. Chairman, for your tolerance and for such a long time that you have specified for investigating our case, listening to the questions and to the arguments. We would like to express sincere thanks to those who supported inscription, those who put forward questions, and those who quite kindly provided us with advice. Although we still believe in that the site is quite liable of being inscribed, but since we are committed to the spirit of the convention and to the mode of thinking prevailing here, we will agree, and we here announce that we will be back soon with a full-fledged nomination. Thank you very much, sir.
Merci beaucoup, la délégation de l'Iran. J'appelle, c'est le temps des rapporteurs de travailler, s'il vous plaît. Rapporteur, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. on voulait souligner, d'après la discussion et la proposition des délégués, que c'est une valeur potentielle exceptionnelle qui est déclarée. Donc toutes les délégations, on était d'accord qu'il y a beaucoup de potentiel, beaucoup de valeurs qu'il faut apprécier. Donc on voulait mettre ça dans le paragraphe 2. Maintenant, on est en train de déplacer toutes les délégations qui ne se sont pas opposées à un renvoi. Voilà, je ne sais pas si vous êtes d'accord on a proposé ça, comme je peux vous lire, renvoi à l'État partie et reconnaît la valeur universelle, exceptionnelle, potentielle, importante. Ou bien on peut barrer potentiel, si vous voulez. Reconnaît la valeur universelle exceptionnelle, importante.
La Suisse, vous avez la parole.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Il faut, je pense, que le comité se décide, soit on renvoie et alors la valeur universelle et exceptionnelle est avérée, donc il n'y a pas besoin de répéter, et puis elle n'est pas potentielle dans ce sens-là, soit il n'y a pas de valeur, mais je crois que cette décision a déjà été prise maintenant. Merci.
Si vous me permettez, je peux continuer. Merci. Bon, je vais présenter. On va travailler. Il y a l'Inde, Monsieur le Président.
I give the floor to India.
Thank you, Chair. There's great merit in following the Swiss. You also don't need the word great. You don't need to get into a debate on it. There is outstanding universal value that has been recognized. Secondly, since I have the floor and I don't want to take it again and again, at some point I do want a paragraph which I think reflects the sentiments of the committee, that we request the advisory body and the state party to work closely and quickly. Terminologies, nomenclatures you could change, but that's the sense of what I want.
I give the floor to ICOMOS, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, may I say that ICOMOS would certainly support a committee decision in which we are asked to work closely with the state party. We would certainly do all we can to support the state party to develop this nomination. But may I also say, in relation to outstanding universal value and how this is phrased, as I understood it, the discussion, the committee were certainly of the view that this property could demonstrate outstanding universal value. The question was precisely how, and how we set out the attributes and how we actually define the outstanding universal value. I wonder if there's any way that could be captured under paragraph 2, rather than the outstanding universal value having been recognized implies that it is defined, which as I understand it, has not quite been agreed.
Give the floor again to India.
I'm sorry, Chair, but I think the committee is fairly clear that there is outstanding universal value. The elaboration of that, the enunciation of that, is something that we leave to ICOMOS and the state party over the next few months, and I emphasize the few months. The sense of what the members of the committee are saying is that this is an exceptional site. There is clearly outstanding universal value. In fact, I heard many member states say that there is an urgency to the recognition and inscription. That is the sense. Beyond that, terminologies, the elaboration, I'm sure that the advisory body with its vast experience can work closely with the state party. Thank you, Chair.
Rapporteur, please.
Si je vous prie d'aller au numéro 2, si vous avez terminé le 4 qu'on vient de rédiger, s'il vous plaît, allez, ouais, voilà. Voilà, 2, on s'est mis d'accord. Après, je vous dis justement qu'on a barré le petit a. S'il vous plaît, anglais et français ensemble. OK. Merci. Donc, on a barré le petit a. On continue. Paragraphe 3, c'est à rédiger. Et vous savez bien que ça, on a besoin de temps. On a au paragraphe 4, comme demandé par l'Inde, on dit demande que l'État partie demande à l'État partie et aux organisations consultatives de continuer à travailler étroitement à l'élaboration du dossier de nomination ainsi qu'avec les autres États, spécialement ceux de la région, pour promouvoir le concept de paysage culturel désertique. Donc, la deuxième partie, on a pris pris de l'amendement de l'Irak, tel qui a été proposé. J'espère que l'Irak n'oppose à notre proposition. Et ensuite, le petit B. On a le petit b qu'on a gardé, qui a été proposé auparavant. Donc, je ne pense pas qu'il y a besoin de vous le lire ou relire, de perdre plus de temps. On va continuer. Merci. Le C, on a barré l'ancien C, l'ancien D et l'ancien paragraphe 4. Voilà, Monsieur le Président. C'est la proposition telle qu'amendée, prête à être adoptée. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I see no objection now. I now declare the revised text of the decision 37,8b.27 adopted. I express deep thanks to the delegation of the State Party, Iran, for the flexibility that facilitated a lot the work of our committee. Thank you. I'd like to invite the Vice Chair, Agency Ambassador of Colombia. Because I have an appointment now, I have to leave now, please.
Good morning and thank you. Now we turn to our next item on the agenda. I invite ICOMOS to present the nomination of the historic monuments and sites in Kaesong Democratic People's Republic of Korea. But before I give the floor to the Secretariat, Mr. Balsamo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We received a factual error letter for this nomination too, which is to be found on page 13, on page 17 of the English version and page 39 of the French version of document INF 8B4. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Balsamo. ICOMOS, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Les monuments et sites historiques de Kaesong, République démocratique populaire de Corée. L'ensemble des monuments et des sites de Kaesong témoignent de l'histoire et de la culture de la dynastie Koryo, qui régna sur la péninsule coréenne du début du Xe siècle à la fin du XVIe. Les vestiges de cette capitale royale illustrent l'une des périodes importantes de l'histoire de l'Extrême-Orient, notamment la transition du bouddhisme au néo-confucianisme. En termes de catégorie de biens culturels, il s'agit d'un bien en série formé par 12 monuments et sites. Il s'agit d'une proposition d'inscription qui a été examinée par la 32e session du comité et qui l'a différée afin de permettre à l'État partie de reconsidérer la sélection des biens, d'en redéfinir les limites ainsi que les zones tampons, de mieux contrôler les menaces potentielles apportées par le développement urbain. Il a également été recommandé à l'État partie de mieux prendre en compte les sociaux et culturels des transformations économiques actuelles, d'améliorer significativement le système de suivi. Les biens proposés sont situés dans l'ouest du périmètre urbain de la ville moderne actuelle. Ils sont regroupés à proximité d'un ensemble collinaire qui servit d'appui défensif. Ils comprennent 12 biens distincts, relativement proches. 2 éléments isolés de l'ancien dossier ont été retirés. Une zone tampon étendue et unifiée est proposée, comprenant les quartiers urbains et des collines. L'ensemble illustre les principes de géomancie qui ont présidé à la création de la ville et à l'implantation de ces monuments. 5 des biens sont des vestiges défensifs de l'ancienne capitale. Les autres sont des éléments monumentaux et archéologiques ainsi que des mausolées. Manvo-dae est le site du palais royal de la dynastie Koryo. Édifié en 919, il fut incendié en 1361 lors d'une invasion. Seules les fondations en pierre subsistent aujourd'hui. C'est un site archéologique au nord-ouest des collines centrales. L'accès aux salles principales se faisait par 3 portes alignées, des terrasses et des escaliers. Il incarnait la cosmologie bouddhiste. D'importants vestiges non fouillés se situent à l'est comme à l'ouest de l'axe principal du palais. À l'est du palais se trouve l'observatoire astronomique de Chomsongdae, qui joua un rôle social et politique important par ses prédictions astrales et météorologiques. Il remonte aux origines de la ville, soit au début du Xe siècle. Le système défensif originel comprenait 2 enceintes fortifiées. Un mur intérieur remontant aux origines de la dynastie à la fin du IXe siècle et l'enceinte extérieure qui le compléta au début du XIe siècle en reliant les sommets extérieurs. Il s'agit aujourd'hui de vestiges regroupés en 5 zones qui enserrent la ville historique. Le tracé défensif extérieur est bien reconnaissable sur la majeure partie de son étendue. Parmi les 5 portes du mur intérieur, il reste seulement la porte de Namdae à l'entrée sud de la ville ancienne. Elle remonte à la fin du XIVe siècle. C'est aujourd'hui un monument isolé au milieu d'un carrefour de la ville moderne. Restaurée après les bombardements de la guerre de Corée, elle est plutôt bien conservée. La surface du bien a été étendue à proximité de cette porte. Koryo Songgyun-van était la plus haute institution pédagogique d'État pour la formation des fonctionnaires de la dynastie Koryo. C'est la plus ancienne institution de ce type de la péninsule coréenne. Elle comprend 17 structures dans un environnement d'arbres. La salle Taeyo-sang et les sanctuaires associés forment actuellement un musée de la dynastie Koryo. Afin de restituer son authenticité, l'État partie propose de construire un nouveau musée et de remettre l'ensemble du Songgyun-van dans son état d'origine d'ici à 2015. Le temple néo-confucéen de Songyan-sovon remonte au XVIe siècle. Il commémore le souvenir du dernier dynaste Koryo, Jong Mongju, assassiné en 1392. C'est un vaste ensemble de constructions à flanc de colline où de nombreux éléments architecturaux et décoratifs sont bien conservés. Le pont Songjuk et ses annexes participent à la commémoration de la figure mythique de Jang Mongju. Il est exclusivement constitué d'éléments de granit assemblés. À proximité se trouvent les 2 pavillons de Fyochung, qui abritent des socles artificiels de granit en forme de tortue et des stèles gravées de poèmes. Ils sont l'un du XVIIIe siècle, l'autre du XIXe. Le mausolée du roi Wang Gong, le fondateur de la dynastie Koryo, est à l'ouest de la ville historique. La chambre funéraire est recouverte d'un monticule de terre entouré de dalles de pierre où sont gravés les signes du zodiaque d'influence taoïste. La tombe est accompagnée de terrasses ornées de balustrades, de lanternes en pierre et de sculptures en pied. Son accès se fait par une allée dallée et des escaliers. Il s'agit cependant d'une restitution remontant au milieu des années 1990 qui s'apparente à une reconstruction. Elle a toutefois été faite avec un souci de documentation important. La statuaire est également une restitution d'originaux en mauvais état. Elle comprend des animaux à fort pouvoir symbolique comme le tigre, des fonctionnaires et des dignitaires de la cour. Le site comprend 7 autres tombes à proximité de la falaise au nord-ouest. Probablement royales, elles couvrent une période allant du XIe au XIIIe siècle. Il comprend aussi l'ensemble Myeonggrung, situé au pied d'une montagne à 1 km au sud-ouest du mausolée Wanggong. Il est formé de 3 tombes, dont celle du 29e roi de Koryo. Le mausolée double de Kongmin, 31e roi de Koryo, et de son épouse, la princesse Roguk, remonte à la seconde partie du XIVe siècle. Les 2 monticules recouvrent chacun une chambre funéraire. Ils sont situés sur la 4e et dernière terrasse, à mi-chemin du sommet du pic Musong. Sur un plan général, il s'agit d'un bien en série qui présente un ensemble résiduel de vestiges d'une capitale ancienne et de nécropole royale à proximité, enserré dans une ville moderne. Beaucoup d'éléments constitutifs ont été détruits au fil de l'histoire et d'autres ont été restaurés, voire reconstruits. Le bien en série comprend toutefois suffisamment d'éléments authentiques et un fort potentiel archéologique pour illustrer la diversité des influences spirituelles et philosophiques, de l'évolution des styles architecturaux et décoratifs, ainsi que des modes de vie. L'authenticité est inégale suivant les sites et l'intégrité visuelle est souvent menacée par l'environnement urbain, mais elles ont été jugées acceptables, notamment grâce à la nouvelle zone tampon élargie et par les mesures de gestion et de protection annoncées. L'analyse comparative a été jugée favorable à l'inscription. La valeur universelle exceptionnelle du bien a été établie et les critères 2 et 4 sont justifiés. Les nouvelles propositions de limite des biens et la nouvelle zone tampon unifiée et élargie sont satisfaisantes. La protection sera pleinement en place lorsque la loi révisée sur la protection des biens culturels aura été promulguée. L'état de conservation des différents biens est convenable, mais il gagnerait à s'ouvrir aux pratiques internationales. Le système de gestion sera acceptable lorsque les nouvelles orientations pour la protection et la gestion du bien seront mises en œuvre. L'ICOMOS recommande que les monuments et sites historiques de Kaesong, République populaire démocratique de Corée, soient inscrits sur la liste du patrimoine mondial sur la base des critères 2 et 3. L'ICOMOS recommande également que l'État partie prenne en considération les points suivants. Développer les plans de gestion du tourisme et d'interprétation pour les éléments du bien proposés pour inscription. Poursuivre le développement du système de suivi afin d'assurer la coordination entre les organes de suivi. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci à vous, Monsieur. Ahora me dirijo a los miembros del comité para presentar sus comentarios. Sin embargo, veo que por supuesto tenemos una evaluación que es bastante favorable el informe de ICOMOS es bastante completo y reconoce los importantes avances y las acciones que el Estado parte realizó para presentar esta nominación, por lo cual puedo anticipar que todos queremos felicitar los grandes esfuerzos realizados por el Estado parte. Así que, de no haber ningún comentario particular, quisiera sugerirles nuevamente que podamos hacer uso de la palabra de la manera más breve posible. Entonces, voy a tomar nota de las delegaciones que quieren hacer comentarios y les pido por favor que podamos avanzar en este punto. Ahora doy la palabra a la delegación de Colombia, seguida por Rusia. Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Estamos ante un bien en el cual la República de Corea viene trabajando desde el año 2000. Después de haber estudiado con detenimiento este expediente y de haber oído los importantes análisis que hace ICOMOS Internacional, solamente nos resta felicitar al Estado coreano y no tenemos duda alguna que tienen todas las capacidades y toda la voluntad para corregir y los pequeños asuntos menores que quedan faltando para completar este expediente de un sitio absolutamente singular y maravilloso. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Now I give the floor to the Russian delegation. Federation, sorry.
Спасибо большое. У нас никаких замечаний и дополнений нет. Мы хотим поздравить Народную Демократическую Республику Корея с этим замечательным вписанием этого замечательного памятника.
Thank you very much, Madame Ambassador. And now, maintenant, je donne la parole à la délégation de la France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La France félicite l'ICOMOS pour son travail et l'État partie pour la qualité de son dossier. Elle salue donc cette proposition d'inscription. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci à vous, Madame. India, you have the floor.
India would like to congratulate the State Party for the excellent dossier it has presently prepared, as well as ICOMOS for a very lucid presentation today, and we support the proposal for inscription. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be brief, Malaysia joins the others in congratulating Korea for a very outstanding serial nomination of 12 properties bound together in the same spirit, and this is a very important contribution to the World Heritage List. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. I give the floor to the delegation of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Germany also supports this nomination and congratulates the State Party for the good nomination done. I would like to add that we have submitted a small amendment to the draft decision regarding the management plan and the recommendation which ICOMOS had in this respect. We come back to this issue when we look at the draft decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Of course, the rapporteur is taking good note of this amendment. I have 5 speakers on my list, so I would also like to again ask you to be as brief as possible. I give the floor to Thailand. That will be followed for the United Arab Emirates. So, Thailand, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Thailand wishes to congratulate the State Party to bring the second cultural site to the attention of the world. And we really support it. We'll try to look into the future. This will be open for the peaceful solution of the unification of Korean Peninsula in the future, that I really hope to see it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Je donne la parole aux Émirats Arabes Unis.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. نحن بدورنا نهني جمهورية كوريا الديمقراطية على هذا الإدراج الرائع. وعندما يعلن قبول إدراج ملف فإننا نفرح للدولة ونفرح لمجموعة التراث العالمي لنا جميعا ونفرح للجهات الاستشارية لأننا لن نصرف وقتا للاختلاف أو الاتفاق معهم فنهنيهم على عملهم الجميل. شكرا.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. Je donne la parole à l'Algérie, suivie par le Mali.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. L'Algérie souscrit à l'inscription de ce site et félicite l'État partie et l'ICOMOS pour le travail qui a été fait. Merci.
Merci à vous, Madame. Le Mali.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. À l'instar de l'Algérie, nous félicitons l'État partie et saluons également le travail fourni par l'ICOMOS. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. Je donne la parole au Qatar, suivi par la Serbie, qui sera le dernier intervenant, le Qatar.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. بكل اختصار نود أن نهنئ دولة الطرف على هذا الملف المتميز ونود أن نشكر الأيكوموس على عملها الممتاز. شكرا.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur l'ambassadeur. Et la Serbie, qui sera le dernier intervenant.
Thank you. Just briefly, Serbia also supports the proposal for the inscription and congratulate Korea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Now I turn to the rapporteur in order to read out the document.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like just to, before we go to the draft decision, I would like to ask Germany, do we need to show the amendment since it's the same that was proposed yesterday for 8B25?
Yes, it is the same. And
we need to discuss it. If nobody objects, we can just proceed to the adoption. We are short of time. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. You can proceed directly to the adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. So, may I consider that draft decision 37-8B30 is then adopted. Let me, of course, congratulate the Democratic People's Republic of Korea on behalf of the entire committee for the inscription of this property. So now I invite the representative of the state party to take the floor for 2 minutes. So please, sir.
이 기회에 나는 유네스코 세계유산위원회 37차 회의를 주최하고 있는 캄보자 정부의 깊은 사의를 표하는 바입니다. 또한 세계유산위원회와 각국 대표 여러분, 세계유산센터와 이커머스, 유네스코 베이징 사무소와 관계 일꾼들이 기울인 사심없는 노력과 협력에 깊은 사의를 표하는 바입니다. 의장 선생, 위원회 성원국 대표 선생들, 대표 여러분, 나는 유네스코 세계유산위원회 제37차 회의가 세계유산 보호협약의 정신과 요구에 맞게 진행되고 있는 데 대하여 기쁘게 생각하며 회의가 모든 면에서 성과적으로 결속되려 하는 것을 표명합니다. 이번에 개성의 육사 유적이 세계문화유산으로 등록된 것은 전체 조선민족의 자랑이고 인류 공동의 자랑입니다. 이번에 개성의 육사 유적이 세계문화유산으로 등록됨으로써 우리는 2004년에 등록된 고구려 벽화무덤과 함께 또 하나의 세계적인 유산을 가질 수 있게 되었습니다. 오늘 조선민주주의인민공화국에서는 경의하는 김정은 동지의 전면 용도 아래 사회주의 강성국가 건설을 위한 총돌력전이 힘있게 벌어지고 있습니다. 현재 민족유산 보호 분야에서는 공화국 정부의 올바른 정책에 따라 민족유산보호법과 시행 규정이 새로 수정 보충되었으며 개성의 역사유적 보호관리 지도서가 작성되어 곧 효력을 발생하게 됩니다. 결국 민족유산과 세계유산에 대한 보호관리를 높은 수준에서 진행할 수 있는 법적 틀거리가 마련되게 됩니다. 조선민주주의인민공화국은 앞으로도 세계유산 보호협약에 지닌 자기 사명과 임무를 다해 나갈 것입니다. 또한 자주 평화 친선의 대정치적理念에 따라 유네스코와 모든 유네스코 성국들 간의 친선협조 관계를 더욱 강화 발전시켜 나가기 위하여 모든 노력을 기울일 것입니다. 대단히 감사합니다.
I'd like to add interpretation. So could I have 1.5 minutes for a speech?
Please do it quickly, sir, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chairperson, for your congratulations on behalf of the World Heritage Committee. And indeed, on this joyful occasion, I'd like to express my sincere, our warm thanks to the Royal Government of Cambodia for hosting this magnificent session of the 37th World Heritage Committee meeting. And my thanks also goes to the World Heritage Center, ICOMOS, and the UNESCO Beijing office, and all the relevant members who spared no effort in the whole process of nomination. Of course, we're very thankful for the overwhelming support given to us by the World Heritage distinguished members of the committee, and we will try all to come up with their expectation and anticipation. Chairperson and the distinguished members of the World Heritage Committee, distinguished delegates, I'd like to express our satisfaction at the successful proceeding of the 37th session of the World Heritage Committee in accordance with the spirit and request of the Convention, 1972 Convention. And I express my sincere expectation that this meeting will conclude bearing great success in all aspects. So the inscription on the World Heritage List of the historic monuments and sites in Kaesong in this meeting constitutes a great pride of all Koreans as well as the humanity as a whole. With the inscription of this site on the World Heritage List, we now have another World Heritage together with the complex of Goguryeo tombs, which was inscribed in 2004. Today, in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the Grand March for materializing the cause of building a thriving state is underway with unabated vigor under the wise leadership of the respected Kim Jong-un. In the field of protecting national heritage, recently, the law on the protection of cultural heritage and the regulation for this implementation of this law have been amended, and the guideline for the protection of the monuments and sites in Kaesong has been prepared. Under the correct and right policy of our government, they will enter into force soon this year. As a result, a legal framework of protection for national heritage, including those inscribed as World Heritage, will be established on a higher level. And last year, the Pyongyang Folklore Park, which is a grand open-air museum showing the time-honored long history of Korea, was constructed in the capital city of Pyongyang. And this park is successfully playing its role as a center of cultural and historical education, which is a manifestation of the firm resolve and will of a government to value and to protect our culture. Independence and peace and friendship are the constant external politic ideals of the government of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea will, under the banner of these ideals, direct all efforts to further strengthen the friendly and cooperation relations with the member states of UNESCO. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea shall steadily fulfill its responsibilities and obligations to the Convention. Ending my speech, I'd like to thank you once again for your support and expectations and anticipation. Thank you very much.
Congratulations again to the State Party. And now I think we have to suspend the session for lunch break. And before I give the floor to the Secretariat for some announcements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We have the operational guidelines group at 12:30 in the bureau room, and we have the budget group at 1:30. The chair of the budget group will inform you whether or not there is an evening session of the budget group, and he will announce where this will take place. Then you have an advisory body side event, everything you always wanted to know about the advisory bodies, and you can ask any question to them in room 4 on the 4th floor, starting at 12:45. Thank you very much.
the mic.